top stories for the hour. Ethiopia condemns irresponsible allegations of atrocities for sinister political agenda. And mass graves of thousands of TPLF militant leaders found in Churchill town. Hello and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Binyam Gatana. Thank you for joining us and do stay with us. The current generation of Africa is duty-bound to shoulder responsibilities to reinvigorate the ideals of Pan-Africanism in order to maintain the unity and integrity of the continent. Most importantly, the aspiration of Agenda 2063 of the African Union geared towards ensuring the prosperity of Africa would be effective with the active engagement of the youth of the continent. In this consideration, Ethiopia is set to host the first African Youth Summit, will take place in Addis Ababa from October 29 to October 31st, 2022. The summit's goal is to promote Pan-Africanist vision and the sentiment among prospective young Africans, as well as to strengthen integrations in Africa's role in international issues. The summit, which is initiated by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, is being organized by the Prime Minister's Office and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now, guests are arriving in Addis Ababa for the first African Youth Summit. Meanwhile, the first African Youth Summit under the theme Integrated Africa, the Bridge of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed will be held in Addis Ababa from October 29 to 31st, 2022. The summit aims to promote Pan-Africanist vision and sentiment to prospective youth Africans and strengthen integrations and the role of African in international issues. To shed more light on this, I am now joined by Jonas Adaye, Honorable Member of the Ethiopian Dialogue Commission and Director of the Institute for Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University. Good evening, Dr. Jonas. Thank you for joining me.
Good evening.
So let's have some sort of reflection in line with the first African Youth Summit, which is going to be taking place here in the capital, Addis Ababa. What mechanisms are needed to strengthen the brotherhood of African youth?
I think whenever we talk about Pan-Africanism, we are referring to decolonization. And when we are talking about youth, youth are the future of a nation, or if you like, a world, or the continent itself, when we are talking about African youth. So I think the mechanisms, to my mind, are uniting the youth across the continent and making them aware that we are under the influence of particularly colonial mentality and ignoring our own culture, our own identity, our own Ubuntu philosophy or communal thinking, and willingly colonizing our own minds by almost worshipping what modernization redefined as westernization, and that is eroding the mind of the youth, corrupting the mind of the youth. So the best way, the best mechanism to bring the youth together is, number one, to make them aware that they should decolonize their mind. Number two, they are the owners of the future, not only tomorrow's leader, but they are already leaders as of today. Particularly, it is they who are to make their own future brighter and better. So number three, I propose we have 6 subcontinents or RECs and REIMs, that is regional economic communities. So according to those divisions, also there should be youth organizations that bring together the youth spirit, the youth energy, the youth inspiration, so as to decolonize themselves and expand the idea of Pan-Africanism with a view to building the Africa we want, which goes in line with the AU Agenda of 2063.
Interesting, Dr. Jonas. Having considered what you've said, what can we say about these events in terms of promoting the African agenda and reaffirming our stance against the undue pressure of the foreign power?
Great. Currently we are facing, if you like, a new world order. That new world order seems to be gradually, slowly, but surely is definitely no more one hegemonic way of thinking. But superhighway thinking are being almost outdated, and we are expecting multipolar world, and it is time for Africa and African youth to claim, just like their fathers, Kwame Nkrumah, Haile Selassie, Jomo Kenyatta, Sedar Senghor, and of course many other fathers. So their spirit must be now revived in the youth themselves. So because, as you can see now, the West is almost marching towards Africa to once again scrambling for Africa, colonizing Africa, this time totally in a different word, by, number one, colonizing the mind through social media, Coca-Colaization, globalization, CNNization, BBCization. Through these media, the media is propagating and at the same time brainwashing the youth, immediately depriving them their right to think as Africans, as their own identity, but rather making black not beautiful, but backward. So that is to be repressed. And at the same time, the youth must really stand up together, unite together, and reclaim their own identity. Africa owns almost every raw material. As Shakespeare 500 years ago said, better things are coming from Africa. So we should prove that, and the youth must stand for that. That time is really tomorrow as they come together. Going back again, because they have their own history. Africa is origin of humanity, origin of civilization, origin of philosophy. So they must realize that, and they must really be prepared. So as we said, the mechanisms are rejuvenating themselves, and at the same time also coming back, saying that beautiful blackness is beautiful. So we have to be together. Here, we are not really being really anti-others. No, we mean the world, a better world for us all across the world, with yellow, or white, or black, or brown. We are all human beings. But Africa must be at the center, as it is the origin of humanity.
Dr. Jonas Adaye, thank you so much for the brief reflections you've made.
My pleasure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, now step into another news. The government of Ethiopia can no longer tolerate the defamatory falsehood being spread against Ethiopia by various Western entities, according to Government Communication Service. It is shameful that they parrot TPLF's irresponsible propaganda that the most heinous crimes could or might be committed in Ethiopia. They are not alleging intent or actors. They just say that there is a distinct possibility, the Government Communication Service stated. Government Communication Service said in a statement that it is regrettable that the few institutions of repute could not resist joining this orchestrated campaign against Ethiopia. Some might be fooled into believing this defamation against Ethiopia. Some share this intention of using this allegation to force Ethiopia into submission. They are mistaken that by making such outrageous allegations, they could intimidate the government of Ethiopia to change course in its defensive measures against the TPLF, it added. The statement pointed out that some are jumping to rescue the group no matter what. Some Western officials openly admit that they post such rhetoric because Ethiopia refused to succumb to their instruction. The bandwagon of accusations and slander does not change facts on the ground. The statement said, adding, the government acknowledged that some vulnerable organizations and well-meaning actors could be unwitting participants in this campaign. It is very irresponsible and shameful that allegation of most reprehensible and the gravest of all crimes is being made for the political ends, it added. The government of Ethiopia is thus forced to weigh its options and consider its relation with some states and entities that are making unsubstantiated and politically motivated accusations of such gravity against the country. It cannot continue to tolerate such extreme slander and assert, the service underlined. The government is committed to the AU-convened peace talks because it is determined to end the conflict peacefully and in durable fashion. Meanwhile, the government of Ethiopia is equally committed to ensuring accountability for violation of human rights and humanitarian law arising out of the conflict, the statement added. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're still watching Addis News Hour. Now step into a similar story. Mass graves where thousands of militants and leaders of the terrorist TPLF were buried found in Churchill town. It is a public knowledge that the terrorist TPLF group unleashed attack on the Northern Command of the Ethiopian National Defense Force in the dark of November 4, 2020, and the group was posing serious national security threats to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ethiopia. At the time, the terrorist group massacred several members of the Northern Command of Ethiopian National Defense Force as well as left many others with physical injuries and psychological traumas. As the National Defense Force is now advancing to the Tigray region to control all airports as well as other federal facilities and liberate the people, the hidden secrets of TPLF continue to be exposed in the areas that are being liberated due to the sacrifice of the defense force. As a result, mass graves of thousands of militants and officers of the terrorist group were found on the eastern direction of Churchill town. This shows that the top leaders of the terrorist group will leave no stone unturned to stay in power with the blood of the people of Tigray. The top leaders of the terrorist group have no also mercy even for the militants who fought along the group, and the mass graves found in the area have proved their evil deeds. Similarly, the mass graves are coded, and in some graves, about 3 to 5 bodies are buried together, it was learned.
በልጆችሽ መኖርን መርጣለሽ ሳንለይሽ ፍቅርሽ በልባችን የሚኖር ማንም አይለየን አንቺ ከሞት በቀር ያያት የቅድማ ያታላቅ ቅርስ ኮራዴ ጋሻቸው ሲታወስ በቅኝ ያልተገዛሽ መሬታችን ነፃነት ነው ክብራችን ጀግንነታችን ወግና ዋሉ ያገራችን ያውዳ ዓመት የሰንበት ህብረታችን የክረምት የበጋ ባለጸጋ ኢትዮጵያ ኢትዮጵያ ለሚቷ ሸጋ ኢትዮጵያ ኢትዮጵያ ለሚቷ ሸጋ ኢትዮጵያ ኢትዮጵያ ለሚቷ ሸጋ
Welcome back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Now step into another news. Westerners and their media outlets are describing the situation in Ethiopia as out of control and resorting to dramatization of the news rather than revealing realities on the ground. During her time with ETV, Hermela Brook, who is an Ethiopian advocate in Paris, stated that some Western countries and their medias are engaged in unfair interference in Ethiopia's internal affairs. Hermela also said that this is a clear demonstration of the fact that Western media-based narrative supports armed rebels, undermines elected Ethiopian government as a strategy for destabilizing a nation. Johannes Fanton has compiled the following account. Let's take a look at.
Right after the treacherous attack of the TPLF forces against the northern command of Ethiopia, Western media outlets have shifted their attention on Ethiopia. Many agree that the trend of these media institutions is biased towards TPLF, which is labeled a terrorist group by the government. After the 2 years of repeated requests for peace by the Ethiopian government, when the peace talks started through the African Union, the Westerners and their media, who have no respect for the people of Ethiopia except for their own interests, have been continued trying to use the peace talks in a way that benefits them. It seems that these external bodies are not happy that the war is raging in Ethiopia because of their long experience of trading in war. Therefore, when the Ethiopian government is sitting in South Africa for peaceful talks with the terrorist group, they have started to say that the situation in Ethiopia is out of control. According to Hermela Brook, an Ethiopian advocate in Paris, Western countries and their media outlets are showing their undue interference in Ethiopia's internal affairs.
It looks like the TPLF side is having advancement and is gaining territory and has a political advantage. Nothing comes out from these parties. And now, since the National Defense Force is very well conducting the operation of law enforcement, meaning that the government reserves all rights to protect the civilians, their citizens of the country. So now they're coming back with all these medias, name them, Reuters, BBC, CNN, all of them come voicing this narrative that is constructed. In fact, they have the same words even, so they planned it, I guess, to say the same thing. They said the situation is spiraling out of control when, in fact, like you mentioned, the parties are gathering in South Africa to make peace talk.
Hermela also criticizes the Westerners for ignoring the crisis facing the American politics and the European economy, while they are saying the war in Ethiopia is out of control.
I really find it very surprising that they come up with this it's spiraling out of control narrative. In fact, to be honest, what is really spiraling out of control is the European economy, the energy crisis coming up, the financial crisis also behind the corner, and the American politics. That is what is really spiraling out of control.
Hermela said that those who are repeatedly showing their disdain for the country by equalizing the government elected by the people and the group that has been classified as a terrorist by the highest authority of the country are doing so because it will give them an opportunity to intervene. Adding that she said what they are doing in Ethiopia is what they have done before in Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya, and that is their strategy to destabilize a nation.
The tactic that is used right now here is called both-sidism. So in putting in on the same level the aggressor and the protector brings the ability for the interventionists to play their cards. So it's a very famous tactic that they used, name it, in Afghanistan. Even they ended up with the Taliban in the government, and the American announced that they were very successful in their retreat from Afghanistan.
Many people agree that the undue interference in the internal affairs of countries that is seen by the Westerners and their media is a sign that they are still not free from the colonial mentality in the 21st century.
That was Johannes Fanton for the report. Now another domain. Ethiopian ambassador to Tanzania said double standards approach by the rights groups significantly erode their credibility. Shibru revealed that the military operation in Tigray region is to ensure the safety and security of Tigray people. Goshi Maleso brings us to the speed. Take a look.
Since the TPLF committed heinous attacks on the National Army bases stationed in Mekelle, Ethiopia has been grappling with the coordinated diplomatic and media warfare. Even some rights groups who vowed to defend human rights alleged Ethiopian government with the complicity of TPLF without considering the realities on the ground. Earlier this week, the Human Rights Watch called an embargo against Ethiopia. Following this, the Ethiopian government has castigated the Human Rights Watch call for sanctions and arms embargo on the Horn of African country. Responding to Human Rights Watch, the Ethiopian ambassador to Tanzania, Shibru Mamo, said double standard approach by the rights group significantly erode their credibility. The federal government, currently embroiled a war with Tigrayan forces, insists it would never be cowed by the organization's smear campaigns. Such a double standard approach also significantly erodes the credibility of the Human Rights Watch that vows to defend the human rights, Ethiopia said through its embassy in Dar es Salaam. Shibru Mamo has dismissed the call as part of a smear campaign against the federal government in Addis Ababa. It is a concoction of baseless allegations and a coordinated media campaigns by various international organizations, he said in a statement to the Citizen newspaper. The goal, he pointed out, is to exert maximum pressure on the federal government to cease military operations in Tigray state. Shibru defended the military operation by the federal forces in Tigray, saying its aim was to restore law and order. This will go along with disarming the Tigray fighters and bringing its leaders to justice, thereby guaranteeing the safety and security of the Tigrayan people. Shibru said despite the fighting, the authorities have ensured that the relief aid was delivered to the needy people in the war-ravaged areas. He wondered as to why the Human Rights Watch was quiet when the Tigrayan forces looted aid, food, fuel and medical supplies in Mekelle. Similarly, Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN Security Council, Taye Asqaselasi, also said the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia is born out of politically motivated to intensify pressure against Ethiopia. Ethiopia has called upon the UNSC members to avoid steps on the AU-led peace talks.
We also explained to Council members to need to approach the matter from a principled point of view, in that the government of Ethiopia and security forces can station and operate from any part of the country, including Tigray. I also underscore the commitment of the government of Ethiopia to pursue peaceful means under the peace efforts of the AU led by the envoy of the African Union for the Horn of Africa. I implored Council members to support this process and avoid any conduct that might cast doubt on the AU-led process.
Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva, Zennebe Kebede, for his part, said the Biden administration and West use human rights groups to interfere in the internal affairs of sovereign nations.
The implication of tabling resolutions which do not have human rights substance, but motivated by political objectives, affects not only Ethiopia, but already many other African countries and even non-African countries have been affected because the Western powers who usually try to make use of the Human Rights Forum as a political tool, as a political forum to push their political objectives.
The AU-led peace talks is taking place in Pretoria, South Africa, to end the 2-year-long war, but the U.S. appears to be threatening Ethiopia in the African Union peace talks.
Major publication of the establishment of the United States. It's not the top level, but it's up there. And in their editorial, so this is an editorial of the paper, they say that we have to stop genocide and that the leverage that the West has, primarily the US, and that may be why they're at the talks, is that we can prevent Ethiopia from achieving the funds necessary to continue its development. And therefore, we can deprive them of necessary development funds. And if they don't do what we like, we can delay debt rescheduling. So if they want their debts rescheduled and they want assistance, they're going to have to do what we say. So that's just one threat from a U.S. establishment publication, and that typifies the attitude.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're still watching Addis News Hour, now another domain. For many years, issues concerning Africa have been most of the time decided in the absence of Africa in the United Nations Security Council. In addition, some Western and European countries have been also exhibited meddling in the internal affair of Africa, including Ethiopia. However, Ethiopia won't accept any pressure against its efforts to maintain territorial integrity and sovereignty. Director General for the International Organization's Affairs at Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ayala Lear, said. He also stressed that the request of African heads of states for Africa's permanent seat at the UN Security Council is significant. Tigist Nisa has compiled the full story. Let's take a look.
Even if Africa takes 1/4 of the United Nations member because of its close to 1.4 billion population in 55 countries, permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council is not something that the continent get to enjoy. That's why issues concerning Africa have been most of the time decided in the absence of Africa in the United Nations Security Council. However, currently, African leaders have been denouncing the unfair representation of Africa in the UN Security Council.
So the African Union and the African states are, promoting and asking for the right places at the UN Security Council to have its fair share in representing Africa. So for that, African leaders have made a decision that called Zilwini Consensus on that, how the African states struggle to get a permanent seat or permanent seats that commensurate with the African states' position. So they are working on that. There is work in progress, and there is discussion at the UN General Assembly or the UN United Nations for arrange for reforming the UN Security Council. So when this reform completed, Africa definitely will have its right place at the UN Security Council. But we don't know how soon this will happen, but negotiation or discussions, interactions and dialogues are ongoing, and African states have decided at the African Union to pursue this collectively.
Most of the time, some international organizations and Westerners continued putting diplomatic pressure on Africa. The recent diplomatic pressure on Ethiopia through recognizing terrorist-designated TPLF is a good testimony. However, Ethiopia won't accept pressure against its efforts to maintain territorial integrity and sovereignty, Ayala noted.
Well, Ethiopia is always respects the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and as you know, Ethiopians since ancient time have been defending its sovereignty, its territory, and never succumbed to foreign pressures. So for Ethiopia, there is no really room to give or to expose its national security or its territorial integrity and sovereignty for foreign pressures.
The bosses in the Security Council say you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked. Reform the Security Council.
Ethiopia, one of the two signatories of the UN Charter, has been contributing its fair share for the achievement of a united globe. Director General of the International Organization's Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ayala Liri, told ETV that Ethiopia has been contributing to the UN, providing peacekeeping troops. Tigist Yunesa once again reports.
እኔ ቀዳማዊ ኃይለ ሥላሴ የኢትዮጵያ ንጉሠ ነገሥት የዛሬ 8 ወር 50 መንግስታት
Ethiopia is one of the founding members of the United Nations back in 1945. When the UN Charter was negotiated, Ethiopia was an active participant. Ethiopia is one of the two signatories of the UN Charter and has since been contributing its fair share in achievement of a united global body. Director General for International Organizations Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ayala Liri, told ETV that Ethiopia has been contributing to the UN, providing peacekeeping troops.
Ethiopia, since 1915, from the early establishment of the UN, has been contributing in providing peacekeepers and deploying peacekeepers in different parts of the world. The first one was in 1950 in South Korea, on the Korean Peninsula, when there was a conflict there. Under the UN, Ethiopia has contributed troops and successfully accomplished its mandate. Since then, also in 1964, also participated in Congo conflict and contributed troops, peacekeeping troops, to maintain peace and security there. Since then, Ethiopia has deployed in different parts of Africa its peacekeeping forces in Rwanda, Burundi, Liberia, and recently in Sudan, and currently also under the AU in Somalia and under the UN in South Sudan. So in terms of contributing to peace and security, Ethiopia has been doing its fair share, and its contribution is one of the exemplary and commendable.
Ayala also underscored that since Ethiopia is serving as the seat for 27 UN organs, it has strong desires to facilitate UN activities for a fairer and inclusive global order.
The other contribution Ethiopia made to UN is that 3 times Ethiopia has been a member of non-permanent member of the Security Council. So in that time, during these 3 times, it has contributed. It is part to the world peace, maintaining of the world peace and security. So this is one. The second one. The other one is Ethiopia also, is a seat of ECA and the seat of one of the UN organ, which is an organ representing or dedicated to Africa. And also there are more than 28 or 27 UN organs or entities here in Ethiopia which works in terms of humanitarian development and technical assistance. So Ethiopia also benefits from these UN organs, and it also facilitates for UN organs to work in Ethiopia. So these are, in a nutshell, its contribution.
The United Nations was established after the end of the Second World War. The conference of its establishment was held in San Francisco in 1945. There were only 51 countries that signed on the charter. Representing Ethiopia, Aklilu Habteweld, the then foreign minister, signed the charter. Ethiopia is one of the earliest signatory countries in this charter. Apart from that, Ethiopia has ratified many of the United Nations conventions and also served as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Unlike many African countries, Ethiopia was also member of the League of Nations.
We're back again, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are in our business segment. Following Ethiopia's decision to open its financial sector to foreign investors, the Commercial Bank of Kenya expressed its interest in engaging in the country's financial sector. A delegation of the bank's senior officials visited the Ethiopian Investment Commission. The delegation commended the Ethiopia's government's recent decision to open up the financial sector to foreign investors. Following Ethiopia's offer to foreign investors in the sector, The Commercial Bank of Kenya is the latest to express interest to be engaged in the sector in the country. Tamasgen Tilahun, Deputy Commissioner of Ethiopian Investment Commission, explained to the delegation about the investment policies, recent economic reforms, and objective of opening up the financial sector to foreign investors. Meanwhile, Commercial Bank of Kenya has more than 125 years of experience in the banking sector and is operating in 7 East African countries as per Ethiopian Investment Commission.
Cuba and Africa share a very good relationship, and actually the involvement of Cuba in Africa.
As I told you, Africa is perceived as one of our own.
What can Africa learn from Cuba's experience?
Our sample was very bad for the superpowers because what happened is all the countries decide to take their own destiny in their hands.
What does Cuba stand to gain from that?
Yeah, I will arrive to that. So it's a service that we offer to different countries.
Cuba stands out in, and that is medical diplomacy.
We are very proud, and we are very faithful to our friends.
We're now on the last segments, and President William Ruto has announced a plan to grow 5 billion new trees as part of his climate change mitigation agenda. To achieve the goal, Ruto asked every Kenyan, children included, to work towards growing 100 trees each. The head of state was speaking on Saturday during the commissioning of the Taba Dam in Kiringana County, where urged Kenyans to protect the environment, especially by planting trees and engaging in agroforestry to combat the severe droughts that has gripped into the nation.
We have already undertaken as a country the policy direction that we are going to plant 5 billion trees in the next 5 years and another 10 billion trees in the next 10 years. That is going to contribute significantly to the fight against desertification and the challenges that come with climate change.
And now recap of the top stories once again. Ethiopia condemns irresponsible allegations of atrocities for sinister political agenda. And the mass graves of thousands of TPLF military leaders found in Churchill Town. You've been watching Addis News Hour with Zenusam Binyam Getana. Thank you for joining us. And now, goodbye for me now. Have a peaceful evening.